Imagine the simplicity of an act of generosity that triggers a series of events capable of changing lives. Pedro, a poor boy, faced a daily struggle to secure a single meal for himself and his family. In a moment of deep empathy, he decides to give his only food to a stranger, not imagining that this simple gesture could transform his reality in unimaginable ways. This stranger, who later turns out to be a millionaire, is touched by Pedro's kindness and decides to reciprocate in a surprising way. This moving act makes us reflect on the true power of generosity and how small gestures can lead to great changes. Get ready for an emotional and inspiring journey where the courage and kindness of a young boy intertwine with the surprise and gratitude of a wealthy man, showing that regardless of circumstances, we can all make a difference. There was a boy named Pedro who lived in a small village. His family, consisting of him, his mother, and his two brothers, faced financial difficulties. Pedro, a poor boy, always wore a hopeful smile on his face despite the adversities. The house they lived in was humble, with walls worn by time and a roof that barely withstood the rains. However, the family unity made them face every obstacle together, keeping hope alive in their hearts. Pedro did not know abundance. Each day was a struggle to secure the basics. He woke up early every morning to help his mother fetch firewood and water, while his younger brothers stayed home. Hunger was a constant companion, but Pedro's determination was even greater. He ran through the village's dirt streets, trying to find odd jobs that could earn him some coins. Sometimes he managed to carry bags for neighbors or sweep yards, but the money was never enough. Despite everything, Pedro knew that generosity was an invaluable virtue. Amidst the daily struggle, he never stopped dreaming of a better future. The only meal he managed to get each day was a true treasure. It was something simple, a piece of hard bread and a bit of thin milk. But for Pedro, it represented a symbol of hope and resilience. He shared this moment with his family, feeling grateful to still have something to put in his stomach. Pedro rose with the sun every day, his mind already focused on the mission of finding food. His routine was arduous and repetitive, but he never got discouraged. As he left home, his keen eyes scanned the streets for any opportunity. He knew that for a poor boy like him, every penny was valuable. His hands, calloused from work, showed the determination of someone who, despite being young, already knew the harshness of life. Each day brought new challenges, and Pedro was always willing to face them. He would run to the local market, where he often found small jobs. The villagers, moved by his perseverance, sometimes offered him a fruit or a piece of bread. Even so, there were days when he returned home empty-handed. During these times, the strength of the generosity he found in small gestures kept him firm and hopeful. Pedro also knew that help could come from unexpected places. Once, while walking down the streets, he encountered an elderly lady struggling to carry a heavy bag. Without a second thought, he ran to help her. In gratitude, the lady gave him some coins. This small act of generosity made Pedro believe even more in the kindness of people. His daily struggle for food was tough, but he never gave up, always believing that better days would come. Pedro's only meal of the day was a sacred moment. He and his family would gather around a small wooden table, sharing the little they had. Usually it was a piece of hardened bread and a bit of watery milk. Though simple, this meal was laden with meaning and hope. For Pedro, each bite was a reminder of his resilience and the generosity that permeated his spirit. The importance of this meal transcended physical nourishment. It was a moment of family unity, where even amidst difficulties, they found strength in one another. Pedro looked at his younger brothers and felt the responsibility to be an example of perseverance. His mother, with tired eyes, always had a word of encouragement, reinforcing the importance of staying united. This simple daily meal was a symbol of the struggle and hope that kept the family standing. Pedro knew that despite the scarcity, generosity did not depend on abundance. He had learned in his short life that small actions could have significant impacts. The only meal of the day was proof of this. Even when they shared the little they had, Pedro felt profound gratitude. This feeling of thankfulness, even amid poverty, nourished not only his body, but also his spirit, strengthening his determination to seek a better future. That morning, Pedro had worked hard carrying boxes at the market and was paid with a piece of bread and an apple. He walked through the bustling city streets, carefully holding the food. The shops and market stalls were in full swing, and the aroma of fresh foods made his stomach rumble even more. However, Pedro was determined to bring the meal home intact, where his family was waiting for him. As Pedro walked, he observed the people around him, each wrapped up in their own worlds. He saw children playing, merchants shouting their offers, and ladies chatting at the doorsteps of houses. The city pulsed with life, but for Pedro, the focus was always on finding a way to survive another day. His sharp eyes searched for opportunities, but his mind was focused on protecting that precious meal. Pedro's walk was not just a daily task, but a journey of reflection. Each step represented an effort to ensure his family had something to eat. And even with constant hunger, he never failed to notice the simple beauty of the city at dawn. The cobblestone streets, the flowers in the gardens, and the smiles of the people were reminders that despite the difficulties, there were always reasons to keep fighting and believing in kindness and generosity. As Pedro walked, he spotted a man sitting on the sidewalk, dressed in simple but clean clothes, with a lost look in his eyes. The stranger had a well-kept beard and gray hair that gave him a wise appearance. Despite his modest looks, there was something about him that conveyed serenity and confidence. Pedro felt a strange connection with this man, as if there was something deeper behind his calm presence. The man looked up when Pedro approached and, with a gentle smile, greeted the boy. The stranger's voice was calm and comforting, contrasting with the city's hustle around them. Pedro, surprised by the approach, hesitated for a moment before returning the smile. They started talking, and the man, with a friendly tone, asked Pedro about his life and what he was doing carrying that simple meal. Their interaction was marked by a sense of mutual respect and curiosity. Pedro, always careful with his words, shared a bit about his routine and the daily struggle to get food. The man listened attentively, without interrupting, showing sincere empathy. Gradually, Pedro felt more at ease and realized that this encounter was no mere coincidence. There was something special in that exchange of looks and words that connected them in an unexpected way. As they talked, Pedro noticed that the stranger seemed tired and hungry. Despite his own hunger, something inside Pedro urged him to act generously. He looked at the piece of bread and the apple in his hands and felt a strong emotion. The decision was not easy, but the image of the needy man touched his heart deeply and movingly. Pedro knew how precious money and food were for him and his family, but generosity spoke louder. With a decisive gesture, Pedro extended his hand and offered the meal to the man. The stranger, surprised, hesitated for a moment before accepting the gift. His eyes sparkled with gratitude, and an emotional smile lit up his face. Pedro felt a wave of satisfaction and relief, as if that act of kindness had the power to transform not only the man's day, but also his own. The exchange of money and food for a simple gesture of generosity seemed at that moment the most natural and right thing to do. Pedro's decision was an act of courage and altruism. He knew that by giving away the food, he would return home empty-handed and with his stomach still growling. However, the man's smile and the sparkle of gratitude in his eyes were a reward that no money could buy. Pedro felt that despite his own poverty, he had the ability to make a significant difference in someone else's life. And with that, he learned that generosity, even in small actions, has a transformative power. Pedro, despite his youth, always had a big heart and an innate generosity. The sight of the stranger sitting on the sidewalk awakened a deep empathy within him. He knew what it was like to feel hunger and despair, and at that moment, his own experience motivated him to act. Pedro felt that no matter how difficult his life was, sharing the little he had could bring some relief and hope to someone in a similar situation. The upbringing Pedro received from his mother also influenced his decision. She always taught him about the importance of kindness and generosity, even when one has little. These teachings echoed in his mind as he extended his hand with the food. For Pedro, generosity was not just an isolated act, but a reflection of deep values that he carried in his heart. He knew that by giving away his meal, he was honoring his family's principles and showing that compassion was one of the greatest treasures he possessed. Moreover, Pedro believed in the power of small actions to create significant impacts. He remembered other occasions when small acts of kindness had changed his day, bringing him renewed energy. This belief in the transformative force of generosity drove him to give away the meal. He wanted to be a light in the stranger's life, just as others had been in his own. Pedro knew that even without money, he possessed the wealth of a generous heart, capable of making a difference. The stranger was initially stunned by Pedro's gesture. In a world where many hurried past, ignoring his presence, the unexpected generosity of the poor boy moved him deeply. His eyes filled with tears as he accepted the offered food. The surprise on his face soon turned into a genuine smile, revealing a gratitude that he seemed unable to express in words. The man's reaction did not go unnoticed by Pedro. He saw in the stranger's eyes a reflection of his own daily struggle, and the shared emotion between them created a silent bond. The man, still incredulous, thanked him repeatedly, his voice choked with emotion. For him, that piece of bread and apple represented more than just a meal. It was a symbol of hope and humanity amid difficulties. The impact of Pedro's act was immediate and powerful. The stranger, touched by the boy's generosity, felt a renewed faith in people. His expression of gratitude was not just for the food, but for the gesture that made him feel seen and valued. The initial surprise gave way to deep appreciation, and he realized that even in the most adverse circumstances, kindness could still flourish. Pedro, seeing the man's reaction, felt an inner joy, knowing that his small act had made a big difference. After receiving the meal, the stranger looked at Pedro with eyes shining with gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means to me, young man," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Pedro, though shy, felt compelled to respond. "We all go through hard times," he began, "but I believe that sharing what little we have makes it all worthwhile." These words, simple and sincere, carried a wisdom that transcended his age. The man, impressed with Pedro's maturity and generosity, wanted to know more about him. He asked about his family and life in the small village. Pedro, feeling at ease, spoke about his mother, his brothers, and the daily struggle to get food. He explained how that piece of bread and the apple were the result of a whole day's work at the market. The man listened attentively, each word from Pedro reinforcing the respect and admiration he already felt for the boy. Their conversation continued for a few more minutes, both feeling a rare and significant connection. The man shared a bit of his own story, revealing that despite his modest appearance, he had once been a millionaire who lost everything under unexpected circumstances. Pedro, surprised, listened attentively, absorbing every detail. The exchange of stories between them was more than just a conversation. It was a meeting of souls who, through generosity and sharing, found a moment of true humanity. With his heart warmed by the act of generosity, Pedro began his walk back home. His empty stomach growled, but he felt an inner satisfaction that surpassed his hunger. Each step was a reminder of the kindness he had spread that day. As the afternoon turned to evening, the village began to calm down, with the lights of the houses turning on one by one. Pedro walked through the familiar streets, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and contentment. When Pedro arrived home, he was met with worried looks from his mother and siblings. They knew how important that meal was, and had been anxiously awaiting Pedro's return. With a calm smile, he recounted the unexpected encounter and his decision to give away the food. His mother, though initially surprised, felt a deep pride for her son. She knew that generosity was a value she had always tried to teach, and seeing Pedro put it into practice was a reward in itself. Even without food, the family gathered around the small table, talking about their day and reaffirming their unity. Pedro realized that despite the hunger, there was something more valuable that kept him strong: the certainty that love and generosity could transform lives. He went to bed that night with an empty stomach but a full heart, dreaming of a future where small acts of kindness could make a big difference. The next day, Pedro woke up with a strange sense of anticipation. As he helped his mother with the morning chores, a luxurious car stopped in front of their house. Out of the vehicle came the man he had helped the previous day. Dressed in simple clothes but now with a different posture, he approached Pedro's humble home. The surprise was immediate, and Pedro was left speechless seeing him there again. The man formally introduced himself to Pedro's family, revealing that his name was Carlos. He explained that despite his unassuming appearance, he was a millionaire going through a period of reflection about his life and fortune. Carlos had lost his faith in humanity until he met Pedro. The boy's generosity had moved him so deeply that he decided to give back in a significant way. The revelation left everyone stunned, especially Pedro's mother, who was at a loss for words. Carlos recounted how that simple act of kindness had restored his hope and made him decide that he needed to do something to help Pedro's family. He spoke about his intentions not just to thank them, but to give back in a way that could truly transform their lives. Pedro, still processing the information, felt a wave of emotion and gratitude. Carlos's revelation was not just surprising, but a confirmation that generosity could indeed change the world. Carlos, still moved by Pedro's act, didn't want to repay him with words alone. With a warm smile, Carlos explained that he intended to transform the lives of Pedro and his family. He promised to help them in various ways, ensuring they would never go hungry or lack basic necessities again. Pedro and his family listened attentively, incredulous and grateful. Carlos began by detailing his plans. He offered Pedro a scholarship at one of the best schools in the region, ensuring that the boy had access to a quality education. Additionally, he committed to providing food and financial resources for the family, allowing them to live with dignity and security. Pedro's mother, with tears in her eyes, thanked him repeatedly, unable to believe Carlos's generosity. The impact of Carlos's words was immediate and profound. Pedro, still in shock, felt enormous gratitude. The generosity he had shown seemed to be returning multiplied. Carlos was not only offering material help, but also hope and opportunity. Pedro understood that this moment was a turning point in their lives, a powerful testimony to how a small act of kindness can trigger enormous transformation. The future, which had seemed so uncertain, was now full of promises and possibilities. The next morning, Carlos fulfilled his promise and returned to Pedro's home, this time bringing a small team of assistants and various supplies. The contrast between the luxurious car and Pedro's modest home was evident, but Carlos made sure to show respect and humility. He was received with curious and grateful looks, and Pedro's mother, still incredulous, invited him in. Pedro and his siblings watched with bright eyes, full of hope. Carlos began to explain in detail his plans to assist the family. He brought enough food for several weeks, new clothes, and a small amount of money to cover immediate expenses. Additionally, he presented a plan for home improvements, promising to repair the roof and install new furniture. The transformation would start immediately, and the assistants began unloading supplies and organizing everything efficiently. Pedro's mother could hardly contain her tears of gratitude. Carlos's visit brought not only material resources, but also new energy and optimism to Pedro's home. The millionaire made sure to talk to each family member, learning about their needs and desires. He also reiterated his promise to ensure Pedro's education, something the boy had always dreamed of but never imagined possible. The house, once marked by poverty, began to fill with laughter and hope, showing that generosity and kindness had the power to transform lives. Carlos wasted no time turning his promises into reality. He arranged for Pedro to be enrolled in an excellent private school. The boy, who had always dreamed of a quality education, now had the chance to learn and grow in a stimulating environment. With new books and a pristine uniform, Pedro finally felt equal to the other children, ready to explore his full potential. Beyond education, Carlos ensured that Pedro's family would never go hungry again. Weekly, he sent baskets of nutritious food, guaranteeing that everyone had enough to eat. The once empty and sad table was now filled with fresh fruits, vegetables, and bread. Pedro's mother, relieved, began to see her children's health improve day by day. The financial support also allowed her to rest a bit more, without the constant worry of unpaid bills. The impact of Carlos's actions was felt not only by Pedro's family, but also by the community. The millionaire's generosity began to inspire others to help. Neighbors joined together to contribute what they could, and soon, the small village started to transform. The story of Pedro and Carlos spread, showing that acts of kindness and generosity could create waves of change. Pedro now had not only a promising future, but also the certainty that generosity was a powerful force. The reaction of Pedro's family to Carlos's actions was one of deep gratitude and emotion. Pedro's mother, who bore the weight of supporting the family, felt a mix of relief and joy. Seeing her children with new clothes and food on the table was a dream come true. She couldn't hold back her tears of happiness, thanking Carlos with a warm and sincere hug. To her, Carlos's help was nothing short of a miracle. Pedro's younger siblings, though not fully understanding the magnitude of the transformation, felt the difference. The new environment, regular meals, and atmosphere of hope changed their lives for the better. They looked up to Pedro with admiration, seeing him as a hero who, with a simple act of generosity, had changed the family's destiny. The house, once marked by scarcity, now overflowed with laughter and play, reflecting the positive impact of the help they received. Pedro, for his part, felt a deep responsibility to honor Carlos's generosity. He dedicated himself wholeheartedly to his studies, knowing that education was the key to a bright future. Every day he saw the happy faces of his mother and siblings, and felt even more motivated to make the most of the opportunity given to him. The transformation of his family's life reinforced in Pedro the importance of generosity and the power of a simple act of kindness to change the world. With access to quality education, Pedro began to flourish in ways he had never imagined. At school, he stood out as a dedicated and curious student, always eager to learn something new. His teachers quickly noticed his potential and invested even more in his development. Pedro not only absorbed knowledge like a sponge, but also showed profound gratitude for the opportunity he had been given. The new opportunities extended beyond the classroom. Recognizing Pedro's talent and determination, Carlos began introducing him to various extracurricular activities. Pedro discovered a passion for sports, participating in competitions and excelling in running and soccer. He also had the chance to explore the arts, learning to play musical instruments and participating in theatrical performances. Each new experience broadened his horizons and showed him that the world was full of possibilities. Pedro's growth was evident to everyone around him. The small village, which knew him as a poor and hardworking boy, now saw him as an example of overcoming adversity and achieving success. Pedro's transformation inspired other children to dream big and believe that with dedication and generosity, they could achieve anything. Aware of the impact of his journey, Pedro began to nurture a desire to give back to the community that had always supported him, eager to help others in the same way he had been helped. The friendship between Pedro and Carlos continued to grow over the years. The bond that began with a simple act of generosity transformed into a deep and lasting relationship. Carlos became more than a benefactor to Pedro. He was a mentor and a friend. Carlos frequently visited Pedro, bringing not only material support, but also valuable advice and inspiring stories from his own life. These visits were moments of learning and inspiration for Pedro. Carlos also made sure to involve Pedro in his business activities. He took the young man to meetings and events, allowing him to observe and learn about the business world. Pedro, always attentive and curious, absorbed everything with interest. He saw in Carlos not just an example of financial success, but also of ethical leadership and social responsibility. This exposure to the business world fueled Pedro's dreams and opened his eyes to what he could achieve. The friendship between the two men was based on mutual respect and admiration. Pedro, now older and wiser, recognized how fortunate he was to have found someone so generous and willing to invest in his future. Conversely, Carlos saw in Pedro a young man with incredible potential and a generous heart, who represented hope and the promise of a better future. Together, they shared a bond defined not by money, but by the deep connection and positive impact they had on each other's lives. Pedro's act of generosity not only changed his life and that of his family, but also had a profound impact on the community. The story of the poor boy who gave his only meal to an unknown millionaire quickly spread throughout the village and beyond. Inspired by Pedro's story, many people began to practice acts of kindness and generosity in their daily lives. The small village, once marked by scarcity and despair, began to flourish with a new spirit of solidarity and mutual support. Neighbors, seeing the transformation in Pedro's life, started to believe more in the power of small actions. Community initiatives sprang up, with people coming together to help those in need. Food exchange programs, house repair projects, and even a community fund to support children's education were created. The community, once fragmented by poverty, found in generosity a new way to strengthen and prosper. Pedro, now an influential and respected young man, actively participated in these changes. He used his own story as an example that regardless of the situation, everyone can make a difference. In his speeches and meetings, he encouraged people to believe in the transformative power of generosity and kindness. The village, revitalized by these new values, became an example of how compassion can lead to a true social revolution. Thus, Pedro's act echoed, transforming not only his life but also that of an entire community. As an adult, Pedro often reflected on his incredible journey. Sitting in his office, he looked out the window and thought about how a simple act of generosity had changed his life so profoundly. The memories of his poor childhood, daily struggles, and scarce food were always present in his mind, but now they were accompanied by feelings of gratitude and pride. He understood that each challenge he faced shaped him and prepared him to be the person he is today. In moments of introspection, Pedro thought about the influence of Carlos, the millionaire who had entered his life so unexpectedly. Carlos not only provided material support, but also served as a mentor and friend, guiding Pedro with wisdom and care. The gratitude Pedro felt for Carlos was immense, and he knew that without his help and guidance, many of the opportunities he had would not have been possible. Pedro committed himself to honoring this generosity by giving back to the community and helping others achieve their dreams. Pedro also reflected on the values his mother had taught him, especially the importance of generosity and kindness. He saw how these principles had been fundamental in his journey and sought to incorporate them into his daily life. Pedro's journey, from a poor boy to a successful and respected adult, was a living testament to the power of generosity and kindness. He knew that although he had achieved much, his mission to help others and spread these values was just beginning. As Pedro reflected on his journey, he recognized the vital importance of generosity and kindness in his life. He understood that these values had not only changed his destiny, but also had the power to transform society as a whole. Pedro firmly believed that acts of kindness, no matter how small, created waves of positive impact that spread beyond what was imaginable. He saw generosity as an investment in the future, something that always returned multiplied. Pedro frequently shared this vision with others, encouraging friends, colleagues, and even strangers to practice generosity. He believed that kindness was contagious, and that by inspiring others to be generous, he was contributing to a better world. In his speeches and writings, Pedro used practical examples from his own life to illustrate how small actions could make a big difference. He told stories of how Carlos's unexpected help changed his life, and how he, in turn, helped others. Pedro's central message was clear. Generosity and kindness are powerful forces that everyone possesses, regardless of their financial situation. He encouraged people to look around and find ways to help, whether through time, resources, or simple gestures of compassion. Pedro knew that these actions not only benefited the recipients, but also enriched the givers, creating a virtuous cycle of well-being and personal growth. He lived his life as a testament to the belief that generosity is the key to a brighter and more inclusive future. Looking at his journey, Pedro wanted to leave a clear and inspiring message for everyone who crossed his path. He knew that the difference a small act of generosity could make was immense, something he had experienced firsthand. The story of how he, a poor boy, changed his life and that of his family by giving his only meal to an unknown millionaire was living proof that simple actions could have extraordinary repercussions. Pedro loved sharing his story, not only to inspire, but also to challenge people to believe in the power of their actions. He emphasized that it wasn't necessary to have much to make a difference. Often, true transformation came from simple gestures filled with compassion and empathy. Pedro wanted everyone to know that regardless of their circumstances, they had the capacity to change the world around them, one small act at a time. His final message was a call to action. Pedro encouraged everyone to be proactive in seeking opportunities to help others. He believed that generosity created a cycle of positivity that benefited both the giver and the receiver. Pedro knew that if each person committed to performing at least one act of kindness a day, the impact would be immeasurable. He dreamed of a world where generosity was the norm and not the exception. A world where kindness transformed lives and communities. Pedro's story shows us that generosity and kindness have incredible transformative power. Think about the small actions you can take in your daily life to make a difference. How can you help someone today? Whether it's offering a smile, a word of support, or sharing a little of what you have, these small acts not only benefit those who receive them, but also fill the giver with purpose and joy. Are you ready to apply this knowledge and make a difference? What steps can you take today to incorporate more generosity into your life? Share your experiences and inspire others to do the same. Remember, transformation begins with a simple act. Did you enjoy today's story? Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and hit the bell to not miss our upcoming stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.